I never imagined I would catch my own daughter hiding something worth a fortune right under my nose, and yet here I was standing in the quiet corner of her bedroom, staring at the small locked box she had shoved behind the pile of old textbooks, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. I am Marlene, 42 years old, a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep our house and save just enough for emergencies. Normally calm and careful with people and money, but today, I feel like every bit of control I thought I had has slipped through my fingers. Earlier this morning, I noticed her acting strangely, her hands fidgeting and her eyes darting whenever I mentioned the inheritance my late father left. For us, she is 16, clever and stubborn, always thinking she can outsmart everyone. But seeing her here, hiding a box with gold coins and jewelry I had spent years trusting would be safe until she was older, makes me question everything I believed about her and myself. I keep my breathing shallow, trying to decide if I should confront her now or wait. Part of me wants to grab the box and demand an explanation, while another part fears her reaction and the damage it might do to our fragile relationship. I think about the nights I spent alone, working extra shifts, making sacrifices so she could have a life that felt normal and full. And suddenly, all those sacrifices feel like they were a test I did not know I was taking. I feel betrayal crawling along my skin like a cold whisper, and yet there is a small flicker of doubt. What if there is a reason I do not understand? Could she be protecting the inheritance from someone I cannot see? The thought chills me but also hooks me deeper into curiosity. I step closer to the pile of books, my fingers trembling, my mind racing through scenarios. Should I demand the truth now and risk an argument that could shatter our bond, or quietly watch and figure out her plan first? The room feels smaller, the ticking of the clock in the hallway like a drumbeat, counting down to a moment I cannot avoid. I reach for the box, and at that precise instant I hear a soft sound behind me, like a footstep or a sigh, and I freeze. The air thick with tension as I realize she might be watching me, waiting to see if I will discover her secret. My chest tightens, my instincts screaming both warning and curiosity, and just as I touch the edge of the lid, I hear her voice, calm but with a hint of defiance, asking why I am in her room, and suddenly the world seems to hold its breath, every choice I could make hanging in the balance, and I know in that split second that whatever happens next will change everything between us, forever. After that morning, I could not stop thinking about everything that led us here, about the delicate threads connecting me to my daughter and everyone else in my life. I am constantly reminded of how complicated family can be, how love and resentment can live side by side. My own mother, who passed last year, always told me that keeping secrets only buries the truth deeper, and I feel her absence now more than ever. My friends from work often envy how I manage to balance everything, the job, the house, and my daughter, yet they do not know the nights I cry quietly in the kitchen, worried that one wrong decision could destroy the fragile peace we have. My colleagues respect me, sometimes too much, and I wonder if they see me as someone who never makes mistakes, which makes the weight of this betrayal feel heavier. I remember the first time I noticed my daughter hiding small things. It was nothing serious, just coins or trinkets she claimed she found. I laughed it off, thinking it was childish. But now I see the pattern, a cleverness I underestimated, the way she observes everyone, calculating what they know and what they do not. It reminds me of myself, at her age, sneaking a few dollars from my own mother's purse, convinced I was protecting something no one else could understand, and yet the stakes were nothing compared to this. The gold inheritance now lying in her secret, a silent testament to ambition and desire. I feel proud but also frightened, and that fear mixes with guilt because I realize how much I failed to guide her without controlling her. My brother, always the voice of reason in our family, would tell me to confront her directly, to demand answers, but I know that approach would only make her close off completely. I think of my neighbors, the ones who smile and nod at us in passing. Oblivious to the tension growing in our home, everyone assumes the routine, the normal. Yet beneath it is this invisible game of observation, of trust tested in ways that might never be revealed. I replay conversations in my head, moments when she seemed distant, her laughter forced, her eyes hiding a story she was not ready to tell, and I wonder if she is aware of how much I notice, if her secrecy is a shield or a trap. My thoughts drift to possibilities I cannot ignore. What if someone else finds out? What if her cleverness leads her to choices that put her or us in danger? The weight of inheritance, of family expectations, of loyalty and honesty, presses down on me. I feel the tension coiling tighter in my chest. Yet there is a strange comfort in knowing that love still binds us. Fragile and complicated though it may be, the knowledge that our bond has survived small betrayals before, and perhaps this one can too. And even as I try to map out the steps to understand her, to guide her without breaking her. A quiet voice inside whispers that whatever I do next will define not just our relationship but the path of her life in ways I cannot yet foresee, and I realize that every smile she gives, every deflection and clever excuse, every glance and hesitation holds layers I must unravel carefully. Because once the secret is fully revealed, nothing will be the same. The moment I realized my daughter's secret was more than a simple act of curiosity hit me like a sharp gust of wind. I watched her close the small box carefully and slip it into her backpack. Her hands steady, her eyes calm, and a part of me admired her cleverness, while another part shivered with fear. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure if I should pull her back or let her take the step that could destroy everything. I am Marlene, a woman who has spent years trying to teach values of honesty and trust. And now I face the paradox of seeing those lessons turned into cunning strategy. The thought gnawed at me that she might be preparing to trade or hide the inheritance for reasons I cannot yet imagine. I tried to trace her behavior, the subtle hints she dropped over dinners, the questions she asked about people in town, even the way she handled her friends. I wondered if I had been blind all along, failing to notice the growing cleverness that had been developing quietly. A mix of pride and dread churned in my stomach as I considered confronting her. Yet every scenario I imagined ended with tension rising, with arguments, tears, or worse, a permanent rift I might not be able to repair. Beyond her actions, there were external pressures I could not ignore. My colleagues at work gossiping about financial decisions I made for the company, neighbors commenting on the inheritance, and distant relatives who seemed to circle like vultures, waiting for a mistake. My heart raced as I considered the ripple effect of her choices, the consequences extending beyond just us. Yet, even as I wrestled with anger and fear, a subtle voice reminded me that she is still a child, navigating power and temptation in a way that is both alarming and natural. I remembered how my own mother handled secrets, the lessons she imparted quietly, the warnings left in stories more than rules, and I felt a knot of doubt, wondering if my instinct to punish or control would be worse than letting her experiment. The moral dilemma tightened like a vice, forcing me to weigh protection against freedom, guidance against trust, and love against discipline. I paced the room, glancing at the locked box hidden in plain sight, imagining the possible outcomes, some small, some catastrophic. Every thought a wave of tension that left my chest tight. I considered calling her into the kitchen, speaking calmly, watching her reactions, testing her honesty without confrontation, but fear of her response, sharp and unguarded, froze me. I realized the first turning point was not her act alone, but the responsibility now falling entirely on me to choose the right path. My mind spun through every moral option, every potential misstep, and as the day stretched on, the quiet house seemed heavier, every sound amplified, every shadow suspicious, until finally she returned from school, her smile bright, seemingly innocent. But I could see the flicker of calculation in her eyes, and in that instant, the suspense became unbearable. Every choice I make next could define the line between trust and betrayal, love and resentment, and I could only brace for the storm I knew was coming. The day after I caught her hiding the inheritance, the tension in our home felt unbearable. Every glance she gave me carried a challenge I could not ignore. I tried to act normal at first, keeping conversations light, pretending that I had not seen the box, but every small action I took seemed to feed her cleverness. I am Marlene, a mother who has always believed in honesty and open communication, yet now I am caught in a web of manipulation that I never expected to face with my own daughter. Yesterday I considered confronting her directly, but fear of breaking her trust, or worse, pushing her further into secrecy, kept me silent, and that silence began to have consequences. At work, I found myself distracted, missing small details, forgetting commitments, and colleagues began noticing. My reputation for reliability, which I had spent years building, now wavered under the weight of domestic tension. The inheritance, once a promise of security, had become a silent pressure that no one else could see but me. My daughter moved through the house with a confidence that unnerved me. Her questions about money and distant relatives seemed innocent, but I could feel the calculations behind each word, the subtle tests she ran to see if I would react or lose control. Each moment I hesitated. The stakes grew higher. I thought about calling my brother for advice, but even that felt risky. The wrong words might reach her ears and tip her hand. I began questioning every action I had taken, wondering if in trying to protect her and myself, I had unwittingly encouraged her secretive behavior. The emotional tension was relentless, a gnawing anxiety that never left my chest. Even as I tried to focus on work or household tasks, I felt the invisible clock counting down. The longer I waited, the more dangerous the situation became. And then came the first subtle fallout. A missing check I had planned to deposit, an unopened letter I found under her bed. Tiny signs that her cleverness was not just about hiding treasure but testing boundaries and probing for weakness. I realized the moral dilemma was intensifying. Do I act and risk rebellion? Do I wait and risk loss? Do I trust and risk betrayal? Every decision carried weight. I felt caught in a storm that I could not predict, my mind spun with potential consequences for her, for me, for the fragile network of trust I had painstakingly built. And as I watched her laugh with friends in the living room, seemingly innocent, I could see the flicker of scheming in her eyes, subtle but unmistakable, and I understood that nothing would ever be the same. Our home, once a place of warmth and routine, had become a battlefield of silent strategies and unspoken stakes, and I knew that whatever choice I make next will set a course for our future that cannot be reversed. The suspense twisting inside me like a tightening knot, and just as I reached for the phone to quietly plan my next move, she looked directly at me and smiled, and in that smile, I felt both challenge and warning. A silent message that the game had escalated beyond my control, and I could only hold my breath and wait for the storm that was surely coming. I never expected the truth to hit me the way it did. I had prepared myself for lies, for rebellion, for manipulation, yet the moment she finally spoke, a calm certainty in her voice, it shattered all assumptions. I am Marlene, a mother who believed she knew her daughter inside and out, and suddenly I realized how wrong I had been. She confessed that the gold inheritance was not her alone to claim, that she had been hiding it not out of greed, but to protect it from a distant relative who had quietly been plotting to claim it before either of us could act. The revelation left me frozen, shock and relief twisting together in a strange knot. I had been ready to confront her, to demand explanations, to punish her cleverness. Yet the truth reframed everything. My daughter had been acting not with selfish ambition but with foresight and courage I had never fully recognized. My mind raced as I tried to process the implications. The betrayal I had felt moments before evaporating, replaced by awe and lingering doubt. How had I misjudged her so completely? And yet, even as relief began to settle in, the stakes did not lessen. The relative she feared was still out there, still unaware that we knew. And the responsibility to act rested on both our shoulders. I felt the weight of years of fear and anxiety pressing down, the tension from my own choices, the hesitation, the silent tests of her honesty. And now the urgency to protect what was ours intensified. I reflected on our relationship, the misunderstandings, the small betrayals I had assumed existed, and realized they were shadows cast by my own insecurities. Every missed cue, every sharp glance I thought was defiance, had been her way of navigating a dangerous situation, and a wave of guilt washed over me. Guilt mingled with pride, a mixture so strong it left me almost breathless. I saw her not just as my daughter, but as a partner in a game I barely understood, and yet even in this revelation, uncertainty lingered. I still did not know the full reach of the relative's intentions. I still worried about the delicate trust between us, about whether I could truly support her without overstepping. The emotional stakes were higher than ever, and every plan I considered seemed fragile against the complexity of human motives. I realized in that moment that the story was far from over, that the twist had opened doors to new challenges, new tests of courage, honesty, and strategy, and I felt a mix of dread and determination, knowing that how we moved forward would define the rest of our lives. I looked at her, her eyes steady, her hands folded calmly in front of her, and I felt a surge of resolve, yet also a flicker of fear. The revelation had shifted everything, and still, the future remained uncertain. A storm of possibilities, some hopeful, some dangerous, all demanding vigilance and care, and as I reached out to take her hand, I knew that what we faced next would test not just our wit, but our bond, our values, and our ability to act with both courage and wisdom, the suspense holding tight around us. A promise that even with truth revealed, the journey was only beginning. I never expected the truth to hit me the way it did. I had prepared myself for lies, for rebellion, for manipulation, yet the moment she finally spoke, a calm certainty in her voice, it shattered all assumptions. I am Marlene, a mother who believed she knew her daughter inside and out, and suddenly I realized how wrong I had been. She confessed that the gold inheritance was not her alone to claim, that she had been hiding it not out of greed, but to protect it from a distant relative who had quietly been plotting to claim it before either of us could act. The revelation left me frozen, shock and relief twisting together in a strange knot. I had been ready to confront her, to demand explanations, to punish her cleverness. Yet the truth reframed everything. My daughter had been acting not with selfish ambition but with foresight and courage I had never fully recognized. My mind raced as I tried to process the implications. The betrayal I had felt moments before evaporating, replaced by awe and lingering doubt. How had I misjudged her so completely? And yet, even as relief began to settle in, the stakes did not lessen. The relative she feared was still out there, still unaware that we knew. And the responsibility to act rested on both our shoulders. I felt the weight of years of fear and anxiety pressing down, the tension from my own choices. The hesitation, the silent tests of her honesty. And now the urgency to protect what was ours intensified. I reflected on our relationship, the misunderstandings, the small betrayals I had assumed existed, and realized they were shadows cast by my own insecurities. Every missed cue, every sharp glance I thought was defiance, had been her way of navigating a dangerous situation, and a wave of guilt washed over me. Guilt mingled with pride, a mixture so strong it left me almost breathless. I saw her not just as my daughter, but as a partner in a game I barely understood, and yet even in this revelation, uncertainty lingered. I still did not know the full reach of the relative's intentions. I still worried about the delicate trust between us, about whether I could truly support her without overstepping. The emotional stakes were higher than ever, and every plan I considered seemed fragile against the complexity of human motives. I realized in that moment that the story was far from over, that the twist had opened doors to new challenges, new tests of courage, honesty, and strategy, and I felt a mix of dread and determination, knowing that how we moved forward would define the rest of our lives. I looked at her, her eyes steady, her hands folded calmly in front of her, and I felt a surge of resolve, yet also a flicker of fear. The revelation had shifted everything, and still, the future remained uncertain. A storm of possibilities, some hopeful, some dangerous, all demanding vigilance and care, and as I reached out to take her hand, I knew that what we faced next would test not just our wit, but our bond, our values, and our ability to act with both courage and wisdom, the suspense holding tight around us. A promise that even with truth revealed, the journey was only beginning.
Now that the chaos has settled, I find myself sitting quietly in the living room, watching my daughter organize her desk with a care and focus that feels different than before. I am Marlene, a mother who once believed that control and oversight were the keys to keeping family and fortune safe. And now I understand how fragile that assumption was. The inheritance, the secrets, the tension, all taught me something I could not have learned any other way. Trust is not simply given or enforced. It must be nurtured, guided, and sometimes challenged. I think about the countless moments of fear and doubt, the nights spent wondering if I had misjudged her, and I realize that those feelings were as much a reflection of my own insecurities as they were of her actions. Responsibility is not just about holding power, but about choosing when to step back and allow others to exercise their judgment. I remember the moral dilemmas that pressed on me like heavy stones. The decisions I feared would shatter our bond, and I see now that the right choice was not about avoiding risk, but about facing it together in partnership. I feel a deep sense of pride, not only in myself for finding the courage to trust, but in her for rising to meet that trust with honesty and strategy. Our relationship, once strained and fragile, feels renewed, strengthened by the challenges we have weathered. And I realize that boundaries, both personal and ethical, are not limits to control, but guidelines for respect and understanding. They create a framework where love and responsibility can coexist. I glance at her, and she looks back with a small smile. A quiet acknowledgement of what we have learned and shared, and I feel an emotional resonance that goes beyond relief or triumph, a deep, steady connection that comes from surviving challenges together. I reflect on the external pressures, the relatives, the neighbors, the expectations, and I see clearly that those forces will continue to exist. But we now have the clarity and the wisdom to navigate them, our bond and understanding acting as a shield as much as a compass. I pause and think about the lessons that the story of our inheritance can offer to anyone, the importance of observing carefully, of questioning assumptions, and of acting with both heart and reason. I think about the courage it takes to trust when stakes are high, and the humility needed to recognize when guidance must become partnership. And I find myself wondering quietly, reflecting with gentle curiosity, what would you have done in my place? Would you have acted with caution or confronted the secret head-on? Would you have trusted or controlled? Would you have learned the lessons we discovered through fear and careful observation? The story of my daughter and the inheritance is closed in terms of plot. The gold remains safe, the family bond restored, and yet the reflection it inspires continues. An invitation for anyone who hears it to examine the choices they make in trust, responsibility, and love. And as I sit in the quiet house, I understand that the real treasure was never the gold, but the growth, understanding, and connection that came from navigating the storm, together leaving me calm, grateful, and more aware than ever of the delicate balance that defines life and family.